Alright, guys, welcome back. We are going into part 3 Overwatch League Season 3 Power Rankings. So, we've gone through 20 through 13, 20 Boston Uprising, 19 LA Valiant, 18 London Spitfire, 17 Paris Eternal, 16 Houston Outlaws, 15 Florida Mayhem, 14 Dallas Fuel, and 13 Chengdu Hunters. So, I my power rankings aren't super controversial. I don't think. I've seen a couple of other lists, and I don't have anyone crazy high or crazy low. There's a couple coming up here that I think are going to surprise people, but of course I'll explain them as we go into it. So this is where it starts to get really interesting for me because I think a lot of these teams are really close and they could fluctuate quite a bit depending on how they adjust to metas, how they deal with the travel and things like that. So at number 12, we got the Washington Justice. So they got off to a horrible start. They were probably the worst team or the second worst team in the league for a good amount of season two. And then towards the end, they really kind of came alive, and they were the darlings for a lot of people. They won a lot of games, particularly in stage four. The combo, the charismatic duo of Stratus and Corey on DPS kind of um, captured the love of a lot of players, a lot of the fans for OWL, and I think they're going to be they're going to be pretty hyped up going into this season. The reason I have them at 12, middle of the pack, Corey and Stratus are great, huge pop off ability. Corey, I worry about his hero pool a little bit. But he can absolutely shred people on the Hanzo, on Widowmaker, and Tracer as well. And then Stratus has a great hero pool. Pharah's great. Genji, Mei, etc., etc. So great DPS duo. They're ranking towards the top in terms of that. The main thing I have here is when you look at the tank line. They brought in Roar from the LA Gladiators, who I thought was a pretty massive disappointment last season. Did not perform well at all. Was the weak link of that team. So I don't see him starting too much because they did bring in the combination of Elivote and Lelouch. Two players they had played in contenders. They're very, very good friends. They're best friends. So we'll see how they perform. They did have some success in contenders, but for me, it's a how do I stack them up against the top tank duos? And I can't put them that high. I have to see what happens in the first couple of stages. So that's one thing bringing their ranking down a bit. When you look at the supports listed, they got Arc and Aim God, which is it's solid. Aim God has been a good performer. Arc has been solid for his couple of seasons in the league. Veteran guys that they've been here before. They're not gonna freak out. The moment's not gonna be too big for them. So I see this as a middle of the road team. If they really if their tank line really plays well and they really start to synergize and pick up momentum, this team could definitely vault themselves into the top eight, or even higher than that. Because like I said, they got a couple of those guys that they can carry. They can carry for sure. But I think consistency might be a little bit of a thing with this team. So I can't have them too much higher than number 12. So, um, you're looking at Arc up here. So we will see. They still have the old roster here because you got like Fozix and um, Giannis, Otto, Sansam. So we will see how they perform. Like I said, they'll push for a playoff spot, but I don't like them enough to have them in top 8, top 10 quite yet. So, moving on to number 11. We got the Toronto Defiant. So, you talk about a team that has changed up quite a lot from last year. Most of the core that they brought on for season 2 is gone. Um, they made some, I would say, pretty big upgrades. as you can see, all they have is Roki, who's actually on a two-way. He's on a two-way contract right now. So same thing with Mangachu. So those guys probably won't see a lot of OWL time, at least at the start. We'll see how the season begins. But I really liked a lot of the pickups they made this year. They got, as you guys know, my favorite player, Surefour, on the DPS. They have Logix, who they did acquire in the middle of last year. So two very good DPS players there. They also got Agilities as the projectile DPS player. Agility is again supremely talented guy. He was on LA Valiant for the last couple years. He had a pretty rough season last year. He actually had some things on season one as well. But when he's played well, he's a really good player. I think he was one of the players affected most by goats. He did not take well to Brig Prison at all. So I could see a big bounce back coming in from Agilities, and if he does, I mean, that's a scary DPS trio. Like I said, Mangachu, I don't see him getting much playtime, if any, on as their fourth DPS. So we'll see what they do with him. I wouldn't be surprised if he goes to a different team or is just in contenders for the majority of the season. And then when we talk about the tank line, this is the biggest question mark for me. The main tank, Beast. So Beast is formerly Beast Halo. He was on Fusion University Contenders team, and they had a lot of success. But I think most people would attest to this being guys like their off tank for a couple of years, Bernard, very good player, now on London Spitfire. Alarm, who's a huge Zen carry, and is also extremely nuts on the Ana. He is now on a team we're going to talk about pretty soon, Philly. And then they also had Who Are You, who's a super, super talented projectile player. They also had Zachary on that team as well. So it was a very stacked team. For me, Beast he didn't really throw. He was always a solid player, but he didn't stand out too much. He was never really the reason they won. So if he can come in and play really well, stand up to some of these other main tanks, and just be really coordinated with his team, this team could be top tier. I think they could really surprise some people. For their other tank, they got Nevix, who I like a lot. He didn't really get to play for the Shock last year, but in season one, he was a very good player. Everyone, all the coaches and players, they all speak super highly of him. He's an incredible teammate by all accounts, so I think he'll make a positive impact as well. And with other veterans like Surefour and Logix, I think they're going to have some success. We talk about the back line. They have Kareev, who I really like, one of the most underrated supports in the league. He was on the Valiant the last couple of years, so he'll be great. And then they have Kelix, formerly of Boston Uprising. Always a solid player, never really jumped off the screen for me, but he's not going to lose you games. He's a solid main support, and if this team finds a very good shot caller and their communication gets down, I think they could be a very solid team. They could make a push for top six or maybe even five, and maybe make some waves in the playoffs. So I got them at 11 because of a couple of question marks with Beast, and the support line isn't insane like carry. Well, Kareev does sometimes, but they don't have two like carries like some teams like Vancouver and San Francisco have. So coming in at a very solid 11, got Toronto. Moving on to 10, we got good old Seoul Dynasty. So they finished 8th, as you can see, last year. Their moves were a little strange this offseason. Um, I think some people are going to think this is very low. They got Gesture and Profit from the London Spitfire, who I think are going to play great. You also have a guy like Michelle, who was a very solid off tank for them last year. They got Badoshin as well from the Spitfire. So when you look at it, they have a really great core. I don't love the second DPS spot. When you have Illicit and Fitz going along with Profit. Obviously, Profit's amazing. but I could foresee some issues here. Toby, solid support player. Him and Badoshin there might be a little bit of a getting to know each other period because Toby's been playing with Ryu Jaehong for so long. That might be a little bit of an adjustment, but the reason I have him at 10, I don't think Winston's going to be extremely strong, so that limits Gesture's impact. Like I said, the second DPS spot is a little bit of a question mark for me. A lot of the very good, a lot of the teams that have had so much success, they've had those two DPS players that just either one can just absolutely carry on a given day and be one of the best players in the world. And it's nothing really against Fitz or Illicit, but last year we've seen them fluctuate quite a lot. Fitz played extremely well early on in the playoffs on that Doomfist, and then he really kind of disappeared for a few maps in their close loss to Vancouver. So, very, very talented team. I'm just not sold on all of the pieces coming together yet. So they're starting at 10 for me. That's probably surprising for a lot of people, and I can understand why. But even with legendary players like Gesture and Prophet, I just don't love the gel of that team. So at 9, a team I nearly had below them, we got, this one might be surprising too for people, Shanghai Dragons. So, a supremely talented team. They have the same issue that I have from last year with them. It's getting that off tank. As you can see, they finished 11. They had some really high highs. They had some very low lows. They won Stage 3, which is an incredible achievement. But then they kind of faded towards the end of the season. So when you look at them, their big additions, Fleta and Void. Void on the off tank, is he better than Gaguri and Envy, who they had last year? Yeah, by a little bit. I don't think he's a significant upgrade. I think him and Gaguri are pretty close. Envy not on the team anymore. Then for main tank, they're going to have Stan One, who has been on contenders teams for a while, and solid player. I don't love like him coming in. I don't think he's going to be a top 5 tank, but he'll be solid. Fleta, that was a really big pickup. He's an absolute carry. I mean, Fleta's the meta. There's a reason people made that name up for him. Their support line, solid. When you talk about Izayaki and Luffy, they also did bring up Lee Jaegong, who was very solid as well. So I can see definite upside there. And then for the other DPS, I mean, when you talk about a combination of Fleta and Ding, that's brutal. Apparently, Diem's having some health issues, so he might not be with the team at the start of the year. So that could hurt them a bit. But with guys like Fleta and Ding, I mean, that's a very strong duo. And then Lip as well. So I've seen Shanghai as low as like 11 on some people's lists. I've seen them as high as like 5. So this will be an interesting team because they do have a couple of new pieces that they have to incorporate. Mainly like Stan One, Fleta, and then Void as well. So pretty much a new tank line for them. But there's a ton of talent on this team. I mean, everyone from Seoul on up, I think they could win. They could win it all. So Shanghai comes in at number 9. That is part 3. Like I said, these were harder for me. I think these are 4 supremely talented teams. It's just going to depend on a couple of their roles. Just a couple of either new additions or people I'm not quite set on yet. So let me know what you think about these rankings. I'm sure these will be the most controversial ones yet. And then we're working into the top 8 in the next video. So thank you guys very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. And if you have a couple of fantastic days, I hope to see you in the next one.